Hello, in this tutorial we will overview the Meerkat plugin for Grasshopper 3D. You'll be able to download Meerkat from Food for Rhino website and scroll down and always make sure that you are downloading the latest version, in this case Meerkat Beta 1.6. After you download the zip file, you want to make sure that you right click on the zip file. If there's any permission issue, you want to unblock that, and after that you'll be able to go to your Grasshopper file, special folders, components folder, and pretty much just copy and paste that Meerkat folder inside your libraries folder. After this process, you close and open Rhino and Grasshopper, and under Extra tab, you should be able to find the Meerkat tab. So Meerkat has 4 main components, and what it allows us to do is to work with an existing shapefile. So in this case, I'm using the GIS data of City of LA, which is acquired in 2008. It has 3 different layers: building geometry, land use, and roads. Inside each of these folders, and these do not have to be organized in folders, but that just allows us to keep these in track. You'll see that there are a series of files with the same names, and for us to be able to project the GIS data in the proper location and be able to match, let's say, the buildings with roads and land use, we do need to have all of these components in one place. The main file type that we're going to be working with is called a shapefile, and the shapefile requires this projection file along with all the other ones to be able to place, let's say, data acquired from Los Angeles County versus Orange County, etc. So that allows us to geographically align all the information together. So we're going to go back to our Grasshopper here and go to our extra Meerkat tab, and first we're gonna look at our shapefile and just make sure that we're looking at the right location and then go through this process of cropping. So first we're going to use a component called import shapefile and drag and drop this component. So this one looks like a component that doesn't really provide an output, it just requires an on and off toggle. So if you do not see the same preview, you can go to your display and start to modify whether you're looking at an icon, full name, or abbreviation. In this case, I'm preferring to look at the icon and the full name. I'm going to go to our params tab under input, utilize a Boolean toggle, and turn on the Boolean toggle by connecting the Boolean toggle to the import shapefile. Double click on it, and you should be able to see a Google map that's launched as another window. Now, if you do not see this window appearing, it could be that maybe you're not connected to your Wi-Fi, or that your installation hasn't gone through properly. In that case, you can go back to your File, Special Folders, Components folder, and you're going to make sure that within your Meerkat installation folder, all your components here, if you right click on it, under Properties, they do not have an unblock option here. So as I mentioned in the beginning, if you unblock the overall zip folder, then you're not going to come across that issue. So our Google Maps folder just appears as another floating window, since right now we're somewhere in Seattle, and just like any other map, you can zoom in and out. But let's say if I want to right now overlay and crop data of Los Angeles, it just wouldn't make sense for me to zoom out because I actually do not have any data overlaid here. So for me to start to add GIS data, I'm going to go to here to add shapefile, and this would allow me to browse and find the proper data that I want to add to this. I'm going to go to building geometry first, LARIC, building 2008. Once the layer comes in, now you can modify the width of this, and if you just click on this checkbox, now we should see the overall boundary of the data, in this case Los Angeles County. So this allows me to then go back and add more layers. For instance, I'm going to add land use, and then check again. So we're going to see actually I have less land use data than buildings. Then go back again, and in this case add the roads, and again check, and actually my road and land use data is pretty much overlapping versus I have way more building data. So at this point I want to find the specific site that I want to be working with. This is quite a lot of data, and importing this in Rhino would be quite difficult. So I'm going to zoom in on University of Southern California on the upper left side of the downtown area, and we're going to begin to crop our data. So I'm going to zoom in on part of the campus here. This is the campus boundary. Now you might not want to import the whole campus all at once. It might be heavy for your computer. I'm going to give it a try. So here, right next to the panning tool, we have the draw a rectangle tool. That would allow me to draw a rectangle around the area that I want to be cropping. After that, we have a button here that appears. It says crop shapefile, and I'm going to just click on that. Go to my desktop, and I already have a folder here created called USC Meerkat GIS. You can make a new folder here. Then once your folder is selected, press OK. You do need to give your program a few minutes for it to go through the process of cropping. Hopefully your computer would not crash at this stage. And then once your program comes back again, so right now you can see that the color is changing, so right now it should be good. I'm going to go back to that folder here, US Meerkat GIS, and you should see that actually I have the same layer names but with the extension of MKGIS, so that is Meerkat GIS. So now we're going to import these files. So these are cropped version of GIS data, but they're going to be compatible with the Meerkat plugin. So going back to my Grasshopper here, I could keep this on here, or I can minimize the window. It's completely up to you. If you don't want to work with this window anymore, I could minimize it, close it, crop it, whatever I prefer. For now, I'm going to minimize it. I'm going to group these two components together, and this is going to be set to true to launch Google Maps. Okay, so we're going to go back to our extra tab under Meerkat again, use a component called parse Meerkat file, and it's asking for a file with MKGIS extension, so that these are the files that we've cropped, and right now the color is orange. It means it's still missing data. So we're going to go back to our params under primitive, use a component called file path. This component would allow us to reference a file path as we would any other data type. We're going to right click on it, go to set one file path, and go to our desktop in my case, and just reference these crop files one by one. I'm going to start with the buildings first and connect. The color changes, and if we go to our Rhino, I don't see anything yet. However, in your Rhino environment, because right now we have decimal degrees converted to Euclidean coordinates, so therefore it's way far from the center. If you type ZE for zoom extent, you should see your GIS data that's been imported. So right now I do start to see the boundary of the school, but this rectangular boundary actually is the bounding window that we have selected here. And you're going to see some buildings that are going a little bit outside this boundary. Basically, your building boundaries are these polygons. And once some of the area falls within this boundary, the rest is also selected. Now, just to start to see what we are looking at here, date crops, I'm going to grab a panel here and let's go through these options one by one. Date cropped, so this is the date and time that we have for cropping. We have user and machine name, so this is basically your machine name, a file path. This is where your file is located. So far nothing really specific about the GIS data, but more about the process. But after this point now, we're starting to look at the specifics of the shapefile. So for instance, shape type. Now this is a polygon, so that already tells me that these points that I'm looking at because these are vector GIS file, I can go back and construct the polygon. This is quite important. I'm going to leave this up and open here. Shape count in source. So I'm going to grab another panel here. Shape count in source. So it means in the original GIS file that I've cropped, I have this many, so 3 million something buildings. So that's quite a lot. So obviously, if you're using different shape files, this quantity is going to be different. Bounds in point space. So these are these polygons, this polyline that I'm seeing here, the boundary bands in latitude and longitude. So basically in Los Angeles, latitude is 34 point something and longitude is 118 point something. It is a negative number since we are in the western hemisphere. So this gives us an idea of latitude and longitude of the area that we have cropped. This is in sense of if these is a rectangle, so these are the two extents. Now, field names, this is quite important. Apologies, this one. So these are the categories that we have. So what this tells us is that for every single building that we have within this shapefile, there's 10 total of information that we have collected. For instance, building ID, or the height, or the elevation, or the area. So these are specific information per each building. So this pretty much is like a list that already it tells me that this 10 information is going to be available to us. Shape count in crop. So I'm going to leave this on one side, grab another panel. So from, if you remember, shape count in source, 3 million something. Now shape count in crop, this is how many I have in this cropping area. Now, if you crop a different area, because it's going to be slightly different for each of us, this count is going to be different. Shape ID in source, this is basically the indices of the buildings that we have cropped. It's difficult to understand these without really looking at every single index and plotting these numbers, so we're going to bypass this for now. The next one is quite important. This is field values per shape. So remember that up here we looked at this information called field names. So basically, based on these field names, I'm going to extend this every single building that we have here, and you have to start to kind of imagine that these points would be turned back to a polyline. We have a name of a building, so if it's a generic building, it's called a building. It has an ID, it has a height, so this is in meters. It has an elevation, it has an area, etc. So a year of data collection. So for every single building, we have this information stored. So imagine this is like a folder that's specific to every single building. We're gonna minimize this a little bit, and the last one is series of polylines. Now this is going to be quite heavy, so this is the polyline that we're seeing here. If I want to print this to a panel, you'll see that it's actually going to be quite difficult to make sense of this, because in some buildings we only have, I'm going to try to stop because for some buildings, the most generic ones, it's a square or it's a rectangle, so it has 4 points total. In this case, actually, it's 5 points because the first one and last one is repeating, so you can close your shape. But some buildings can be much more complex, so look at how many points it's constructing this building. Now, at this point, it's a little bit difficult to really figure out what is a building and what's not. So basically, because our points are organized within a list, we can grab a polyline component under curve, under spline, and polyline, and begin to connect the points and create these polylines from them. At this point, I'm going to actually turn off the preview of my Meerkat parse component, selecting and Control Q. Now we're beginning to see these buildings. So some buildings are quite generic. So in this case, you would have 5 points, 4 points total, the first one and last one repeating, but some could be quite complex. Some could also have even courtyards within. Okay, so next step, I'm gonna close this. Next step, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just apply a color to these lines. We're gonna go to our display. We're gonna go to our preview. We're gonna go to our custom preview. connect the polyline to geometry, and we're going to go to params, input, and connect the color swatch. And here you can begin to change the color of these information that you are importing. You could repeat this process 2 more times to be able to import our land use process as well as our roads.